Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This is kind of a 2-for-1 malicious compliance story, so it's going to be kinda long. So this happened back in September of 2006 when I was 16 years old. I was a Girl Scout, and our troop leader basically ran the troop like it was a doctoral level university course and made us girls aged from 12 to 16 run most of the fundraisers to teach us responsibility. Well, in September, we were going to be selling steeply discounted magazine subscriptions through the organization. As a last-ditch effort to earn money for a trip to London, the troop will be going on in April of 2007. I had no intention of participating in the fundraiser since I knew I wasn't going to be able to sell any magazine subscriptions, nor would I be going on the London trip. However, the leader had other ideas and put me in charge of the fundraiser, meaning I will be responsible for handing out the packets to the 3 girls who weren't at the meeting, and I would have to tally up all the sales at the end of the fundraiser. I immediately protested the decision by our militant leader and told her I won't be able to run the fundraiser as I have academic obligations on our meeting night for the entire duration of the fundraiser. The leader sneered at me and said, "What academic obligations could you possibly have for the next 5 Friday nights? I'm in my high school concert band, and weather permitting we're scheduled to play at our school soccer/football games. Each of the performances count as a full test grade, and missing just one performance will dock my grades a full letter." She sneered again and told me an extracurricular activity like band isn't an academic obligation. But ma'am, for me, concert band is an actual class like math or science, and I get graded for it. And I'm going to be studying music in college, so I don't care, you're still going to run the fundraiser. A few of the other girls offered to run the fundraiser instead, but the leader was adamant that I would be the one running the fundraiser, and she snapped, "No, she needs to step up and take some responsibility for a change, even if she's not coming to London with us." So cue malicious compliance. Number 1. I reluctantly agreed to run the fundraiser, and as luck would have it, the weather was perfect and clear for those next 5 Friday nights, so instead of going to my Girl Scout meetings, I was sitting in the stands of my high school's football field, jamming with the rest of the high school band. The night I went back to my Girl Scout meetings was the night I was supposed to turn in all the paperwork for the fundraiser as it was due the following Monday. I had nothing to turn in and my leader was furious with me. In front of everyone and a few of the parents, she screamed, "Thanks to you, the fundraiser failed." I then reminded her, "When you put me in charge, I told you I wasn't going to be able to run it because of school obligations, and you still decided to put me in charge. So I did the responsible thing and put my academics before my extracurricular activities. This fundraiser did not fail because of me. It failed because of you." After that, she looked like she took a bite out of a lemon, handed me her cell phone and said, "Call your mother to come pick you up. You are no longer a member of this troop. I'll change your status to Juliet, a Girl Scout who isn't a member of a troop, when I get home tonight." Before I left, she sarcastically sneered, "Good luck trying to find another troop to join." Cue malicious compliance number 2. After school the following Monday, I called the Girl Scout Council office for my region and asked if there were any cadet/senior troops in the county I lived in, and as it turned out, there was actually one in my hometown. I requested the leader's contact information and called her as soon as I got off the phone with the council office. I explained my situation to her, and if it would be alright if I joined her troop. She said of course, and gave me the troop number and the troop crest. So later that week, I went to the Girl Scout Council store to pick up my new troop's insignia, and that Friday night joined my new troop. But it doesn't end there. Before I left that first meeting, my new leaders asked my mother and I if I wanted to join them for a Girl Scout seminar that was going to be held the next morning at a local hotel. I agreed to go, and the leader added, "Just so you know, your last troop leader is going to be there. Is that okay? I don't know if you want to see her so soon after what happened." I grinned and said, Oh, I definitely want to see her. The aftermath that ensued that sunny but chilly Saturday morning was glorious. Once my troop leaders, the other two girls from my troop, and I arrived at the venue, we were led to a room where my former troop leader, her daughter, and another girl from my former troop were in. Turns out they were also participating in the opening flag ceremony. The look on the leader's face when I entered the room wearing the full insignia for another cadet/senior troop just a week after she kicked me out of her troop was just priceless. She stiffly said a curt hello, while the two girls were like, "We're so glad you were able to join a new troop. None of us blame you for what happened with the fundraiser." And to top it all off, guess who ended up leading the opening flag ceremony because she was the highest ranking girl taking part? Yep, yours truly. One day at work, I got a call over the radio to watch out for a family that had walked in because they were slightly suspicious and had big bags. I was cleaning the aisles when I saw two kids grabbing handfuls of candy. At first, I thought nothing of it because kids do that, until I saw both of them shovel a few in their mouths right next to me. I kindly lean over and say, "Oh, little miss, could you and your sister not eat the candy until you pay for them, please?" They literally start screaming and their parents come rushing like bats out of hell screaming, "What did you do to my kids?" "What? No, I just asked that they didn't." "Who do you think you are? What were you trying to do to them?" "Nothing. They were just eating the candy and I—" "Help us! There's a pedo in here." I sigh and say, "Oh, this isn't going well," under my breath. My manager starts walking up, kind of just sighing because of what he just heard. What happened? Both parents start screaming and hollering over each other, so neither I nor the manager can really understand them. My manager turns to me and asks what happened. The kids were eating the candy and I just asked them not to before paying. Also saw one of them stuff a few in her pink bag too. "Okay, let me handle this." Karen then yelled, "How dare you accuse us of stealing?" My manager asks, "May we see the bag, miss?" "Absolutely not. How dare you accuse us when this pedo tried to kidnap my children?" I look over and see the kids putting more candy into their bags and I point them over to my manager. "Well, I hope you're planning to pay for those." As he points over to the candies that both kids are still shoveling in by the handfuls into their bags and mouths. "What even for? They are only 10 cents anyways. We even asked how much they were, so what if a few go missing? It's not like they are $100 each. Either way, your worker needs to be arrested right now for trying to kidnap my children." "Ma'am, that's not going to happen because I know how my employee is, and he's definitely not like that. However, I may have to call the police if you don't pay for those, and you will be banned from the store if you refuse." The dad walks in front of his banshee of a wife and points a finger at me and my manager. "That son of a gun nearly took my kids and now you're threatening us? You don't talk to my wife or me that way, you understand?" "Sir, I'm going to need you to calm down or else I will be calling security and the police." My manager then asks me, "Would you like to take out your phone and have 911 ready?" "Oh, sure. What's the problem with the candy anyways? It's not like you'll miss them. And besides, I think we should get compensation since you won't deal with that trash over there." Still pointing at me. At this point, I just kind of tuned them out, but it was a lot more bickering and yelling. Eventually, they agreed to open the bags that the two kids were holding on to, and they had roughly $30 worth of candy in their bags. Mind you, a single piece of candy is 10 cents. So by no means was it a small amount of candy, and that's not even counting the ones they ate. Needless to say, they were banned from the store, and my manager came to me later. "You're right?" "Yeah, fine, why?" "Well, not every day you get called that word, you know?" Crazy people gonna be crazy. I ain't gonna let the words of some weirdo pull me down." "Good to hear. By the way, thanks for at least staying somewhat calm the entire time. Believe me, I was anything but. When I heard them call me that word, I got thrown in for a loop there. Honestly, I was wondering if the dad was going to hit me. Wouldn't have come to that. People like that are old talk. Yeah, but if a 300-pound tank came up and started talking crazy to me, I'd be intimidated, wouldn't you?" My manager and I had a good laugh for a bit after they were gone. I don't think the authorities were cold, at least not by us, but they were at the very least banned from our store. Gotta love when people think they can just take what they want and call people whatever insult they can see fit. This all took place 5 years ago. At this time, I had just purchased my first house, but told no one about it. I wasn't even dating at this time. It was a huge 3-bedroom townhouse well outside of the nearest city, and it came with 10 acres of land. Somehow word had gone around that I had just bought a house. I hadn't even moved in at this point. It wasn't long before my entitled aunt found out and apparently made plans to move in and live there despite the fact I hadn't even moved in yet. It wasn't long before I got a call from her. The first thing out of her mouth on this call was not even so much as hello first. Make sure I have a key when I arrive and move in. I'm like, excuse me? Move in? Yes, I'm going to live there and I will allow you to live there too as long as you don't cause issues and get loud. I told her no. You're not moving into my house. I will be thrown out if you try. I'm packing my stuff now. She said that, as if my word was meaningless. And I'll be there first thing in the morning. And you had better have my key in hand then. And she hangs up. As a result, I called the cops, who put me in touch with the local sheriff's department. I explained what was going on, so they told me they would have a patrol check the property from time to time and run off anyone that was not supposed to be there and would arrest those that refused to leave. As it turns out, my entitled aunt tried to go to the property that night and drop some of her stuff off. I was caught by the patrol and told to leave. When she said it was her house, they told her no, it wasn't, and the owner does not want anyone on his property, having to threaten to arrest her if she refused to leave. She called my phone number within an hour at about 11 p.m. and started yelling about the sheriff running her off, and I just hung up on her and unplugged my phone for the night. I got up about 4 a.m. that morning and plugged my phone in and found my message box full of repeated messages from her about how dare I not answer my phone and have her run off from her house. Yes, she actually said her house. Later that morning, I called the sheriff again and requested an officer be there at the house in case she came back and arranged the time for my arrival. On my arrival, a sheriff met me at the house. It was less than 30 minutes until my entitled aunt arrived with a carload of her personals and immediately walked up to me and demanded her key. You're not getting a key, and you're not living here no matter what you think. She blew up at this point and started shouting how it was her house and she was going to live there whether I wanted her to or not. I just smiled, closed the door in her face and locked it in front of her. She of course tried to grab the keys from me, which I simply put it in my pocket and told her, tell that to the sheriff standing behind you. She screamed, bull crap, you're not keeping me out of my house. I looked past her and said, see, what did I tell you? At that, a loud sound came from behind her. Ma'am, you have to leave the property or you will be arrested for trespassing. She turned with a sour look on her face, getting ready to unleash another tirade on whoever was behind her, and instead made a strangled sound and her face went white as a sheet. Ma'am, this man does not want you on his property. As of now, you are considered trespassing and will be arrested if you refuse to leave and cease harassing this gentleman. Before you go auntie, she hates when I call her that. Just because you want something doesn't mean you're going to get it. Such as my new house. If I ever see you on my property again without my permission, I will have you arrested and have your car towed at your expense. If looks could kill, I'll be dead several times over from the glares she was giving me. She then left, giving me the bird on her way to the car, prompting a sharp rebuke from the sheriff. To this day, she has been going around telling anyone that will listen about how I robbed her of her new house and how she's going to get her house back someday. That's going to be a problem for her. Since then, I have improved the property and sold it for a tidy profit to a really nice but takes no crap couple and bought a new property with more acreage, about 24 more acres, and no one is telling her I moved. She did try sneaking back onto the property about 3 months after I sold it, and the couple's husband nearly fought with her because she came at around midnight intending on trying to sneak in through an open window or something. This time she did spend about 30 days in jail, 100 hours community service, and 3 years probation plus fees and court costs for trespassing on private property and attempting to enter a private residence without permission. Don't remember what the actual charge was. Her entitlement knew no bounds. But ultimately, a necessary lesson after learning that she was not getting her way with me. From what I'm told, she's calmed down some but still acts entitled, is actively trying to find where I live. I had to get permission from a friend of mine to share the story. I find it to be a heartwarming story that shows that if you mess with one veteran, you mess with us all. So I have a friend that we will call John. His grandfather is a Korean War and Vietnam War veteran. He served as an infantryman in the United States Marine Corps for over 20 years. He is very proud of his service, and his son and grandson, my friend John, have all followed in his footsteps and served as an infantryman in the Marine Corps proudly. So John's grandfather, who we will call Gunny, retired to a southwestern state that is very hot and covered in cactus. He was widowed and wanted to live closer to his son and grandson. He bought a home in a community that had an HOA. After he moved in, he hung his USMC, United States Marine Corps flag, and the American flag outside his home with pride like he had done in his home back east. Shortly thereafter, he was told that he could not hang his USMC flag because it was against HOA regulations. He even went to a meeting to see if he could get an exemption for military flags since American flags were allowed. The HOA said he could not fly the flag outside, but he was more than welcome to keep it in his home or garage. Gunny, to his credit, decided to go ahead and handle it in a civilized way. Now Gunny is a perfect example of a gruff old veteran, and that USMC flag that he flew was older than his grandson who had just gotten out of the Marine Corps. Gunny asked John if he could invite some of his veteran buddies over for a barbecue and a little think tank session. Including Gunny, John, and John's father, there were 12 of us there. Gunny tells us that he has a plan and he needs our help. He hands us the HOA handbook and tells us that he wants to give them incentive to change their minds about his flag and he'd like our help to do it. After a couple hours of brainstorming, we came up with a plan to encourage the HOA board to allow a military flag to be flown. We put together a plan to go ahead and show our military pride to the entire neighborhood. Now the HOA rules say that he can have anything he wants in his garage, and he can keep his garage door open as long as the garage is being used. In addition, the HOA rules say that there is a quiet ordinance from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. every single night. Keep this in mind. So John and John's father gets every veteran they know, including me, to join in Operation Pride. Starting on a Monday, several of us gather outside Gunny's home, and at 6 a.m. sharp, we play reveille over a boombox. We even stand in formation and do calisthenics right there on his front yard, loudly counting off as though it were boot camp. Those of us who can, because several of us have bad knees, including myself, go for a run or jog in formation up and down the streets of the neighborhood singing Judy's. Gunny even taught us a very colorful one called Napalm Sticks to Kids. The rest of the day, we all take turns hanging out in his garage, where he has proudly displayed a nice collection of military flags, many donated by us. Included are the traditional branch flags, but also the more colorful Death from Above, Kill Them First, Leg Got Sorted Out, and a few other less politically correct flags. While we were in the garage, we needed to be doing something. So John and I chipped in and bought one of those punching dummies that look like a person. You know, the ones that you fill them with sand or water and then punch. Well, wouldn't you know it, Gunny allowed us to do bayonet practice in his garage with a dummy. All day there was at least one of us in there yelling kill, 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 while stabbing that poor dummy. Gunny even let those who didn't have their own rifle and bayonet to borrow one of his old M1s to practice. It was like holding history. When we weren't taking our frustration out on the dummy, we did some weightlifting in the garage, practiced some hand-to-hand combat techniques, and had traditional military lectures. Some of these lectures included how best to stab a person with a knife, and how to project your voice when on parade ground. This will continue until 10 p.m. The next day it started all over again. We did this for over a week. Gunny seemed to enjoy having the company of some veterans at his house all day, and we got a pretty good workout and some great memories. Gunny even shared with us some stories from his time in Korea and Vietnam. A lot of us ended up sharing war stories. Some, including myself, even took the gatherings as an opportunity to vent some of our struggles with PTSD. The group became not just about getting revenge on the HOA, but about supporting each other. The cops were called twice on us, but there was nothing they could do since we weren't breaking any laws. Bayonet practice in your garage or working out are not crimes. After 8 days of fun with Gunny, the HOA sent him a letter stating that he was free to fly his USMC flag outside his house. With that, our daily meetups were no longer needed, but a lot of us have grown close to Gunny over that week and each other as our meetings. Depending on the day and the time of day, there were anywhere from 3 to 18 of us at that house at any given time. Veterans of Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, and Iraq. It meant a lot to us to spend time with each other like this. Gunny set it up so that on the last Sunday of every month, we were all welcome to come to his place for a barbecue and a bonding session. This tradition was kept alive for 18 months until Gunny died. Every one of us attended his funeral. The day of the funeral, we all gathered outside his house at 6 a.m., played reveille, and went on a jog up and down the street singing Judy's in his honor. That old USMC flag still flies at John's father's house proudly. This was 14 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. To start, I bought a house with the intention of doing a flip. When I moved in, the self-appointed block captain let me know who they were the first day. Sadly, they were my next-door neighbors. I tried to be friendly, but listening to them I realized how horrible they were and tried to still be civil. My significant other kept saying just wait for it to be our turn. They bragged about their contracts with the city, forcing people to make improvements on their houses, getting undesirable renters out of the houses, and just harassing people in general. As I worked on flipping my house, the wife became a worse thorn in my side. To start, she demanded I put up a fence so people would quit cutting through my yard and scaring her. Then her and the husband demanded I take care of the weeds in the yard or they will do it and bail me. After that, a storm hit and a tree scraped their shingles and they asked for $1,200 to replace them. The tree was there before I moved in, and by code they are responsible to cut back the branches to the property line. When I wouldn't pay, they had a relative jump my fence and cut the trees down. Needless to say, I began to ignore them, so she became a constant gnat and moved on to another target. Then one day, as I was tearing down my deck for a patio, I realized she put a feral cat colony on a section on my property. I had wondered why all the stray cats were around and I finally found out. I reached out to the city and demanded it be removed, and they said she followed the law on getting it in place. As I tried to get it shut down, she began unhinged behavior from standing in her window staring at me, yelling out the window at me to hitting the fence with items to scare my dog. Here my revenge started. I started by filing a harassment restraining order against the wife and had it granted ex parte with the evidence I provided. Of course, she contested as it was defamatory to her character. Before the hearing, the husband tried to physically intimidate me, so I filed one against him, and it was also granted ex parte. In the hearing, it came up that there was an harassment restraining order against the husband as well. They dogged being served until I had it published as a means of service. I started to make complaints about them and their house. Also, I made police calls when necessary. As I did this, the other neighbors began to realize they could do to them what they had done to them and others. For example, as I was having my front door replaced, needing a building work permit, I knew they were doing internal remodeling, so I called the city inspector and they were fined for not having a permit. As she ranted at the inspector, he looked at my window and saw I had mine displayed. Their back porch became hoarded, so I made another call to a city inspector and they had to clear it out. And they had a broken window on my porch door, so I called an inspector and they had to replace the door. Next, the paint on their house was peeling, so I called an inspector and they had to repaint. The inspector also found the wood underneath was rotted, along with their front porch was slopping, so they needed to fix the front porch, sections of wood, and repaint. Through all this, they had up cameras to prove they were not doing the things I said, for example, hitting the fence. They also pointed the camera at my backyard. As it was legal to point a camera into my yard and a part of my harassment restraining order was her intrusive watching behaviors, I gave the camera the middle finger on my way to and from my garage. When she complained with the city tiring of her, the response was she was admitting to intrusively watching me. The fight over the cat colony came to an end when I realized one of the cats had a serious disease and I began to capture them and turn them into animal control. Don't worry, animal control was part of the feral cat program, so they would not be put down, but the neighbor would have to pay a fine to get each cat out or have the colony closed. Finally, I got the sick one and it had rabies. Part of the program was for her to capture each new cat and have it vaccinated, something she admitted to willingly not doing on her GoFundMe for the colony. I soon had the GoFundMe shut down when I provided the evidence she was not using the funds as she stated they were going to be used. The city now had to act to close the colony. The person at Animal Control who wouldn't respond to my complaints was fired. The neighbors called in a city mediator who we met with, presented all the evidence and said we would not meet with them, and provided extremely racist tweets they made about neighbors. The city cut ties with them as community leaders. With their power to bully gone and having spent what I can only imagine in fines and repairs like they did in numerous other neighbors, after 14 years they sold their house and moved out, way out to the suburbs where they only have one neighbor about 50 yards away. They knew I was wrapping up my flip and would be out in less than a year. Without being able to bully their neighbors with people having their back, they seemed to have no further reason to stay. Needless to say, I did several more things to wear them down. Finally, when I listed my house, it was sold, while theirs was still on the market. As a final FU to them, I reported to the county they had both the new and old house listed as their homestead, meaning they were paying less in property taxes, so they got hit with more fines on the way out. I've worked as an independent contractor in the IT field for over 20 years, doing all manner of things, from creating simple HTML sites to managing a big hotel's complete IT infrastructure. One of the many clients I had back in the day, I was coding big-ish custom websites with a rental company. Now, I had heard a lot of warnings about not working with this guy that owned it. He had a reputation that he was sharp as a tack, backstabbing and conniving. He was a lawyer after all. So I went into the partnership with that in mind. He wanted a new website for his renting gig, where people would list their home for rent, renters would sign up and pay a subscription to the site, and he would get the whole lot. Nothing out of the ordinary there. So we make a pretty good deal on paper. We sign it and I get started on a project. Coding everything in PHP goes well, but he demands subtly that I show him progress only a week into the process. He wants to see the website front now. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I tried explaining to him that the front-end work isn't scheduled to start until after 6 weeks of back-end programming and that I only have pure code to show right now. The contract we signed clearly states this. He then gets on his high horse and demands that I put everything on hold to do the front-end first, design, and then program. I, being really young at the time and fairly naive, agreed to this without asking for it to be added to the contract as an addendum and started working on the design now. Now the contract stated that I was given free reign of the design decisions as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the same logo on the site. So I made a fast draft in Fireworks. This was back when it was a micromedia product before the Adobe acquisition. And within 2 days I showed him. He's not impressed and demands a different direction and sets up a list of demands. I, as always, aim to please the customer and do just what he wants. I design a new layout with his list of demands, but he doesn't like that either. That's how the next 3 months go. A never-ending circle where he's never happy with anything. Now, close to 4 months into the project, he demands to see a working showcase of the back end, and I point out that he himself changed the order and how the project was being done and had demanded that I do the front-end design first instead of the back-end as stated in the contract, which he now turns on me and says, "Yes, the contract we both signed says you will have a working back-end to show me at the end of the month. If you don't honor that, I will have to take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your lack of professionalism." Okay, I now have 12 days to do a back-end for the site. So I get a friend to help me and we work tirelessly through a weekend, and I have a good base to work from in 9 days. Mind you, at this point he has only paid the security on the contract, about 5% of the total price, and has shielded himself from pain by hiding behind, "Well, if you can't honor the contract, why should I? Finish XX work and then I'll pay as per the contract." Remembering now all the warnings I had heard about this guy, I decided to add a special function to the code just to be safe. More on that later. So now it's the end of the month. We have a front-end design he's okay with, a back-end that has been finished to about 85% of what is required according to the contract, and I still have 1 month left to finish everything up. Time for show and tell. Since I was working on this development, I was running it on my own dev server and showed him this in a browser on his computer. I mentioned to him that since I only had 512 kilobytes per second upstream from the server, it might lag a little, but it wouldn't when it would be put on the productional server he has his website on at his hosting company. He says that's okay and the demonstration goes on. As I'm showing him the site, both front-end and back-end, I can see he is immensely happy with it, although he would never say so out loud. He's trying to hide his smile that pops up regularly, and his eyes gleam with all the added ways he can now start making money from. Anyway, he now says that it's way too slow, this is wrong, that is wrong, and blah blah blah. I want you to put it up on my broad server and see how fast the speed is, he asks me. Okay, no problem. I can make that happen. Please pay 50% of the contract and I'll get right on it. I then wait a few days and then I get an email from him where he includes a forward message from the bank detailing a transaction from him to me to the amount of the 50% I asked for. So I push the system to his productional server so he can take a look at it. I then send him an email stating that he can try the system with the supply credentials. What he doesn't know is that I knew he had been fishing around for another programmer to do this project, to pick up from a lazy deadbeat who couldn't do anything right. So I knew he would most likely try to screw me. What I also suspected was that the email he sent me was a transaction proof was a fake, which it ended up being. Bro revenge number 1. Remember that small function I mentioned? Well, what it did was if user X, his user, tried to remove user Y, my admin, from the system without one setting being changed and the configuration first, the system will first delete and purge the database and then remove all the documents in a web root. Well, not 5 minutes after he reads the email from me, he does just that. He tries to delete my admin user from the system to lock me out. And guess who has nothing of the project left? He does. Pro revenge number 2. Since it's considered forgery to spoof an email, especially from a bank, I sent the information to the authorities and he goes under investigation by both the police and the bank lawyers. Pro revenge number 3. I sold the system to a competitor of his for a better price than originally contracted to him, and last I knew he was now blacklisted from owning the company as well as he lost his right to work as a lawyer. I only got that 5% he paid at the beginning, and for working for just over 5 months on this project, that is hardly anything, but the knowledge of his demise will keep my heart warm for the rest of my life. Edit. Since so many people assume this happened in a state, I just wanted to say that I am from a small country in Europe. The laws and regulations here are different than in the States. We have a government agency here that has everything to do with registering companies, and they do keep track of who's who. If you're a serial startup guy who leaves nothing but burnt ashes behind you cannot do it here. You have to register the owner and members of the board of the company if there is one. If you have a prior history of failed companies or you've broken the law in some regard, you are blacklisted